Morning, everyone. Sue Nicholls here from CMKG. Excited to have you at today's virtual training course on refreshing your shopper understanding, a very important topic as we kind of still navigate through the during and after the pandemic. And so it's a topic that I'm very passionate about. I'm Sue Nicholls, and I am the president and owner of CMKG, and I'll be your facilitator in today's course. We also have Ty Snaith and John Rick on the live session who can answer any questions you might have as we go through the course. I really encourage you, you can use the chat box if you're having any issues or if you have any questions specific to the technical side or anything like that. And I'm also going to be asking for your perspective on things, so I'd love for you to use the chat box. We also have the question and answer box. And if you can see that, you can type in questions that you might want me to address, and I'll try to do it during the course. And if I miss it or don't have a chance, then I do have a Q&A planned for the end of the course as well. So looking forward to having a really interactive and great session with you, and I hope you find it useful. In terms of the resources for today, there are going to be student notes available, as well as a COVID shopper resource tool. And there's also going to be a third one available that's a shopper refresh tool that we put together specifically on this topic. And I'll give you more details about that at the end of this course. So we decided to I love running complimentary educational virtual courses, or what we used to call webinars, but we consider these to be more of a training event than a webinar. And so we've kind of decided to go with the virtual training course approach. In LinkedIn, I actually asked for feedback on what are the most important things that people want to learn more about. And so the obvious choice was the changing shopper, as you can see from the survey that we ran. And so that's why I chose that topic for today's session. And we will be running subsequent sessions this year. And, whether it's on omni-channel, which may be the next one, or refreshing your approach to category management, we'll be continuing to run things in LinkedIn to get some perspective from our network on what's most important. And we'll run some additional free educational sessions throughout the year. So, question for you, how many of you have been impacted by the pandemic in the last year? I know I certainly have. Probably the biggest thing for me is missing my beautiful family, and in particular, my two children who both live away, they're adult children. And it not only has it affected our personal lives, but it's also affected our personal shopping behaviors. I know I'm doing things much differently now than I was, just over a year ago. And so how much of our shoppers changed? When you think about it, and if you read anything on the internet, they've actually changed significantly in the past year. And if you didn't know that, then you really need to get updated here. But the work and home life has changed. Our needs, our shopping behaviors, they've all shifted. And in a few short months, consumer purchasing habits, activities, digital behavior, and everything has changed dramatically, making pre-existing consumer research, forecasts, and predictive models almost obsolete in a lot of cases. And so based on that, think about how you are changing your approach and how much you've changed your work to address these monumental shifts that have obviously happened in consumer and shopper behavior. So we really need to challenge the ways that we do work versus what we were doing pre-pandemic last year to stay connected with our shoppers. So I'm really here today to show you examples of some simple ways to reconnect with your shopper and get to know this new shopper in a different light. And don't hold on to things that you knew about the shopper pre the pandemic. So the shopper has changed so much that a transformation really is necessary. A lot of traditional brands are struggling today because they're not understanding the shopper. And it's even more apparent for those who didn't understand the shopper pre-pandemic. And now that all this change has happened in 2020, you know, and alongside technology, data, and the entire retail industry, it's all changed. So the connection to this rapidly changing consumer and shopper are really paramount for successful organizations in the future. And that's really what we're going to talk about today. So in today's session, I'm going to be talking about 4 things. I'm going to give you a little bit more of an update on CMKG and who we are. Then we're going to talk about understanding changing shopper behavior, getting to know your shopper better, and remembering your shopper in all of the work that you do. And when I'm talking about your work, I'm talking as if you're a category management practitioner, a shopper insight specialist, a salesperson, a consultant, a solution provider, any of those kind of things, because this shopper is essential for us to understand in everything we do, because they drive the wallet and they're the decision makers that drive the data we have and everything that happens. And so I hope that you really find some value in today. I'm going to be sharing ways to apply new perspectives in your work for better business building outputs. And I'm also going to be providing kind of a templated way that you can go back after and try to replicate this for your own categories and your own business. So just a quick update on CMKG. So just to let you know who we are, CMKG is my company. It's my baby. I introduced CMKG to the world about 17 years ago. So yes, I'm very old, because before that I worked for Procter & Gamble for quite a long time. I won't tell you how long, or you'll start doing the math on my age. But we are industry thought leaders. We create best-in-class training. We've been developing training in the online space since it was invented. We are highly experienced and focused in retail, consumer packaged goods, and sales industry. Our target audience is category management, shopper insights, and sales, both in retail and in consumer packaged goods and suppliers, for both individuals and teams. So regardless of what size of company that you work for, or if you're looking for individual or team training, we have it all available to you. Another important thing, we're collaborative training partners with the Category Management Association, where we provide training to their members as well. So you can see it on the right-hand side. We work with a lot of different scenarios, and it's one of the most fun parts of the work that I do, is collaborating and working with different types of companies to really make the training relevant and insightful for different groups. We offer a variety of different learning options, including on-demand training, instructor-led training, both in the live space, which you know, that one is TBD, how that's going to go in the future, because a lot of organizations in this forced way of having to go to online training very quickly in 2020 has led to a lot of companies realizing that they can do a lot of on-demand training, as well as virtual instructor-led training, meaning that there's an instructor, but it's through a Zoom meeting, very similar to what we're doing today. And then we also have coaching, we have assessment tests, which I'll tell you a little bit more about later. And then we also have case studies and workshops. So we do have a whole variety for a blended learning approach that can be customized. We have site license and everything else. So as we go through this, hopefully you'll get a flavor for some of the quality of training that we have. The other thing I just want to quickly show you is the topic areas and examples. So we're not just about category management training. We do have category management training for those of you who are practitioners and interested in certification. But we also have training for sales. You can see that we have different types of sales program breakouts, as well as shopper insights and skill development areas. So you can see from this that we have a lot of different topic areas, from data and analytics, category tactics, retail and industry understanding, and so on. And then down the left-hand side, you can see our set of courses. We have I'm going to just zoom this in so you can see it a little bit more closely. So you can see when I scroll down the left-hand side, we have a very large set of courses that are available to you. Actually, I zoomed it too big, so now you can't see it at all. But if I scroll down the left-hand side, there's a lot of courses that are available. And you can see over on the right-hand side that there's different courses X'd off based on the different type of program that it is. And we even have it broken out in green is developing, yellow is capable, and orange is strong. So we do have different strokes for different folks, and we can really customize the learning based on your specific needs. And that program and course breakout that I shared with you, we will be sharing with that at the end with you. So we do have on-demand training where you can purchase courses, you can purchase programs, or you can purchase everything. You can see the dollar signs over on the right-hand side, and we have it, and over on the left, you can see that the on-demand training is for individuals and teams. We have in-person and blended learning, which is both for team training. And then we also have an annual learning subscription for those of you who might just want to be looking for, new and relevant training moving forward, where you can access 25 virtual courses and a whole bunch of other tools. So I just want to let you know that we do have different types of training starting at $125 a person, all the way up to, much deeper and customized training for you. So it's different strokes for different folks. So before I get into the actual training on Shopper, it's really important that you understand all of the complexity associated with the key data sources in our industry. Across the top, you can see we have brick and mortar, omni-channel, as well as pure play e-commerce. So different types of retail formats. And that really results in different types of data and outputs available through POS, retail direct data, panel data, shopper research, shopper insights, industry reports, and additional data. So no wonder things have become so complex. Outside of this course, I ran one recently on the omni-channel and what you need to do in an omni-channel category review and some of the things, because when you're thinking about all these data sources, we have to change our approach. We cannot be manually pulling data across all of these data sources to incorporate things. We have to be more strategic and much more focused on what it is that we're trying to accomplish when we're creating category reviews. And so when we're talking specifically about the shopper, we're talking, in today's session, I'm going to be honing in on panel data and some shopper research, because I want to really dig into that piece and show you the importance of understanding the changing shopper behavior and some of the details that you need to be considering when making decisions and recommendations that tie in with that shopper. So the first part of your shopper refresh, getting to know that shopper again and making sure you're not going back to what you knew or thought you knew pre-pandemic, is understanding changing shopper behavior. So a lot of the work that we do, we need data. And so I rely heavily on some of our solution providers to help with that, some of our partners. And so Shopper Intelligence has some great data that's syndicated shopper research data where they run surveys, and then they can provide that back from a broad perspective all the way down to specific categories and retailers. So they're what they provided with me from a top line perspective is that this is important things to understand, prior to the pandemic. So the top 10 traffic and spend categories in 2018, 2019, you can see the breakout in terms of the traffic, the ones that drive traffic into the store, and then the ones that drive spend. And these categories have not changed in over 2 years pre-pandemic. So they are so stable and so not changing, and it takes a long time for them to change, like by 1 percentage point. But look at this, what happened in 2020? Just think about how many of these categories in traffic do you think changed, or where there were new ones? Look at this. Everything highlighted in yellow is categories that have been added in that were new to the top 10 in terms of traffic and spend. Some pretty crazy numbers. And so really important to understand that everything has changed. And so categories that were not previously traffic drivers may now be traffic drivers. And a really interesting one to hone in on is alcohol. You can see alcohol over on the left is 40% traffic. And then over on the right, you can see hard seltzer and alcohol sparkling, both went in terms of growth and spend as well. So really understand how categories have changed and realize that they may be more or less important to consumers than they have been in the past. Another one is top growth category purchases online. So when you look at this section, you can see that we've got some health and beauty categories that came into the top the first time online. And this was driven by the pandemic. And the point here is that we don't know which of these are behaviors that are going to go back. We're going to revert back and buy all of our fragrances in brick and mortar after this. Or is fragrances now something that, since if shoppers had a positive experience, they might be buying fragrances online from now on because they had such a great experience. Then we've got the healthcare, adult incontinence and cold remedies. And then we've got some cleaners and some other seafood was another one. Seafood was phenomenal, grew leaps and bounds. I just shared a McKinsey report on seafood just yesterday, I think, about how big seafood became in 2020. And it's a lot to do with the fact that people weren't able to go out to restaurants anymore and purchase seafood, so they started buying it at home. So some really interesting numbers here. And so making sure that the categories that you need to understand, that you need to be understanding some of the big top line shifts that have happened in these categories. Another really interesting one is around how online and brick and mortar shoppers have different priorities. This is once again from shopper intelligence data, but the blue indicates brick and mortar. So you can see in order the most important priorities when you're in a brick and mortar store. So how does that compare to online priorities? Significantly. You can see how much less some of these percentages are, or in a few cases, some more. But for online, there's some other priorities that are completely different from the ones that you see here. So, and it has to do with delivery and how quick of delivery, and is delivery free, and those kind of things that aren't associated with brick and mortar. So don't act as if they have different priorities and that you're just speaking to one shopper, because they do have different priorities. And the other interesting thing is that kind of online plus brick and mortar equals the omni-channel. And so we can't just assume that you're either a brick and mortar shopper or an online shopper, but that it's this whole omni-channel presence that we really need to be understanding. So the opportunity is to refresh your connection to your shoppers based on some of those big numbers I showed you here, based on the changing habits of shoppers, and kind of how we navigate in 2021 to make sure that we really do understand our shopper. So I always like delving into one category. And so I'm going to be diving into some numbers for pasta. And the first set of pasta numbers were donated by Numerator, who is another fantastic data provider that gave us data for our use in this training session. So thank you, Numerator. So when we take a look at total pasta numbers, Numerator data is panel data, and basically these are the results from 2021 for the last year versus previous year. So you can see the percentage of households buying is up 2.2 points, buying rate, all of these measures that are in panel data, very important measures, they're all very big and very green. And so pasta is obviously a category that's very highly developed, and to squeeze out 1% of growth in anything in pasta was a hard thing to do. And so these numbers, you can guarantee that most pasta manufacturers as well as retailers selling pasta hopefully saw some significant growth in their pasta numbers. So when you look at these numbers, what are the two most important numbers of these 5 measures that are here? Anyone want to type that into the chat box if they have any ideas? The two most important measures here are the percentage of households buying and the item buying rate, those first two numbers. And the reason for that is because penetration, or percentage of households multiplied by the buying rate, or how much the shopper spends per trip or over the time period, equals sales. And so you should be keeping your eye just on these two numbers. Some of the, and there's, it doesn't, I'm not saying that the other numbers in panel data aren't extremely important, but sometimes they're a dissection of the item buying rate, and that gets into the purchase size, the purchase frequency, the number of trips. And there's some other really great numbers in there, but those two numbers equal sales. And so that's the first two numbers you should be looking at if you kind of find your panel data overwhelming. The other thing that you need to think about is what would you do with these numbers? How can you work with these numbers, and what can you do with them? And my answer to that is that this is only top line pasta data for, this last year and previous year. So we're not getting enough information in this. We don't have enough depth to use this in anything. I wouldn't use this in a presentation just on its own because it doesn't really have any purpose behind it. We need to dig deeper. And so drilling into your results is going to give you a much better indication what's going on. So let's take look at a few examples of that. And this is just a few examples. So first of all, look at the trended information. The beauty with panel data now, we used to only be able to buy it quarterly and sometimes only annually because the significance wasn't there and some other reasons. But now you can actually get monthly results. And so by looking at the monthly results, we can see that household penetration, and these are actual numbers for total US, including brick and mortar and e-commerce. And so you can see that the household penetration. So I've also put in just a simple linear line there to show you that, look at, it's actually growing. So, if we only look at those numbers, then we can say that, yeah, it's trending up. But is there stickiness in these numbers? Are we going to see this continuing to grow? And let's take a look at the buying rate. It basically is a direct reflection, exactly the same in terms of the dollars spent in the category. And obviously there's this thing called this massive peak here in March 2020, which is when everyone was pantry loading and panicking. And then you can start seeing that the numbers come back down again, and then they kind of start going up and down. They're kind of more traditional. You can see that they're still ahead of a year ago, but we have to use our logic when we look at these kind of numbers, because we can't say that based on this that, we're trending forward, because if we look at March 2020, we can see that this only goes to February 2021. So what's going to happen in March, and those numbers are actually probably out now, because I got these numbers a few weeks ago, but it's more than likely, I can almost be 100% certain that they're not going to achieve these numbers that happened in March 2020, which is going to change this linear trend line significantly because it's carrying a lot of that growth there. And so the need here is to make sure we keep an eye on these things in the months ahead to understand what's going to happen and really where this is going to play out, because nobody knows. It's very difficult to determine the stickiness without us keeping an eye on this ourselves and really understanding this, and tracking these numbers going forward at this level of detail. So once again, to get deeper into this, you should be drilling down into product groups and or geography levels, because this is total US. So then you could compare this to a retailer or to a format. You could compare it pasta to different brands or different segments. So don't just do this at the total pasta level, and you're going to get way more insights. And you need this information right now. And typically we don't go, most examples I've seen don't go that level of detail, but you should be going to that level of detail. Another breakdown for you to look at is product groupings. So in this example for pasta, one of their first decisions in the decision tree is on pasta type. And so you can see that what happened in the same time period that this year versus year ago. And you can see that the top ones that grew in penetration points as well as in buying rate. And interestingly, things like ravioli. Well, if you sell ravioli and you see that number, you might want to be drilling in to understand, was that a specific demographic group? Was there a specific brand? Kind of what happened there? And just making sure that you're really seeing where those penetration points came for. It could be driven by distribution. You think about the pantry loading that happened. I remember going to buy pasta one day in the store and all I could get was, you know, the $5 plus super premium, or some really weird types like linguine or bow tie pasta, which was not my option, but it was the only thing available. So those kind of things also have to play when you're thinking. You've got to be logical when you're looking at these numbers and thinking about them. But once again, for further understanding, you can drill down into geography, and you can start looking at brands as well. But brand is only important typically to whoever the supplier of that brand is. And so if you're going in and talking to retailers, you should be looking beyond brand, or, you know, it's ends up being kind of a little bit more self-serving. So understand your changing shopper behavior. I showed you a few examples of that. And you should really drill into that to understand and find those anomalies, find those things that you go, geez, you know, it makes me want to think about what I need to be doing or keeping my eye on to be proactive as we kind of see this roll out, or executing shopper research, running some surveys, better understanding why some of these decisions are happening. And I'm going to be showing you some examples of that from another solution provider, specifically on pasta, in just a few minutes. The next piece is about knowing your shopper. Who are they? Like, how detailed do you know your shopper? And this is a big point of frustration for me, because I work very closely with a lot of organizations, but it's primarily on the sales side. And when you talk about the shopper, when the sales side is looking at who the shopper is versus the shopper who the marketing side is talking about and their target shopper, there's a huge disconnect in a lot of cases. I have seen examples where the marketing team, their target shopper for their brand is, 30 to 40-year-old, high income, large households. But when you go look at their information, that's actually who their shopper is, it's, seniors, 1 to 2 people in the household. And there's not a connection between how they're going to bridge that gap between what they have. And so it makes it really difficult to figure out, how do you tie in with who the current shopper is and who your target shoppers are. And it can be a really big disconnect. So knowing your shopper is critical. So some interesting numbers breaking out the heaviest shoppers. This is once again Numerator's breakout of data. It might be slightly different in the data that you have access to. But some important numbers to look at on this page. You can see that I've broken out in 2 groups, high, medium, and low. This is based on the total items spent per household, the top 33%, medium and low. So this is kind of like heavy buyers, medium buyers, low buyers. And then we've also got the year ago numbers, because I am always the big believer that you need to be looking at year ago, because especially because of the pandemic last year, you need to understand what has changed. Then across the top, I've got some of those key measures from the panel data again: household penetration, purchase frequency, the buying rate, spend per trip, and units per trip. So when you take a look at these numbers, once again, the most important measures in here are we've got our year ago here, but the most important measures in here are the household penetration and the purchase frequency, because household penetration times purchase, or sorry, household penetration and buying rate, because those two equal sales. And so make sure that you keep your eye on those two numbers more than anything else in here. The only ways, like I said, you can increase sales is to either increase the number of shoppers buying or the penetration, or getting them to buy more, which is the buying rate. And if you're kind of going, I don't really understand this panel data very much, we do have a course on it, specifically on panel data. So if you do have access to panel data in your company, then it might be a course that you decide to take, because it's critical for you to understand the key measures, kind of how it all works together. So one of the things, when you take a look at these numbers, you got to look for what the most important numbers are in here. And so probably the biggest numbers that I see in here are penetration. So the past year, past 12 months for the top 33% of pasta buyers are the heavy buyers. So these numbers relate directly to the heavy buyers at this point, because I want to understand who are the heavy pasta buyers and how are they purchasing. So they represent 28.6% of total pasta buyers and 68.9% of total dollars spent. And when you take a look at the year ago numbers, you can see that those numbers actually grew. So that grew by 1.4 percentage points. And the percentage of dollars spent actually went down a little bit. But the interesting thing is that they represent almost 70% of sales in pasta. So they are buying a lot of pasta. And so what do you want to know? You want to know more about them. You need to know those heavy buyers and really dig in to better understand that. So once again, as I've recommended with the other ones, drill down by product, time, and geography levels to really understand them, both from a competitive perspective, if you're a retailer, or if you're creating a retailer pasta review, looking at it from a competitive perspective to compare their growth numbers on their heavy buyers versus their competitors. And you can also do this across brands if you're a supplier, to understand which brands, where did the penetration and dollars spent go, and really digging in to find those nuggets, because these are not insights yet. This is just information. You really need to dig deeper to better understand those numbers, but you need to get in there and get the nuggets. And that's only for the heavy buyers. That doesn't mean that you don't want to better understand. You might want to do a deep dive into your medium buyers and your light buyers as well, because they all play different roles and different importance based, and also it really helps you to understand what it is that they're looking for and what's most and least important to them. When we drill into the demographic data, we get into even more juiciness. I love calling it juiciness because that's what it is. So demographic data is one of a data source that I just find is really underutilized by a lot of organizations. And in fact, when I'm going to do live sessions or virtual sessions with a client and we're going to use some of this data, it takes them a long time to pull it because they don't even know where to access it sometimes. So in this example, I'm only looking at, the generations down the left-hand side. So Gen Z, Millennials, Gen X, and Boomers. A really important way to understand and look at the difference in shoppers based on these different generations, and also at the year ago numbers once again. So first of all, you need to understand the percentage of shoppers that each group represents. So of the 100% of pasta shoppers, 25.8% of those households are millennials, 33.9% are Gen X, 35.8% are boomers. So that's how you read that number. You should always have that number in your demographics. Do not only look at the indexes, because otherwise you don't know which one is most important. Because if I only looked at my index versus all pasta shoppers and did not have these numbers, I might assume that perhaps because baby boomers are only an 85 index on the high pasta shoppers, that maybe it's not important enough for me to understand. If I don't see that Wow, boomers represent 35.8% of households. So they're pretty dang important. And so I can't be ignoring them. So make sure that you have these numbers side by side. Another really important number, this is only, these indexes here are only the percentage of households. You should also be incorporating the dollars into your numbers, because that is going to allow you to compare the percentage of households to percentage of dollars, because dollars is kind of what drives what goes to the bank. And so it's a really important comparison to have too. But for today's session, I just wanted to focus on some of the simple things. So when I go through and look for some insights in this, I can see a few things. I can see that Gen X and boomers are the largest household sizes that purchase pasta. So that's an important thing to know. I can also see that millennials are growing. They're actually up almost 2 percentage points versus a year ago. And these numbers, once again, typically don't change. They might change by 0.1 or 0.2 percentage points over a year, because demographics, typically you don't see them shifting. And you can see some other shifts here. You can see that Gen X actually went down from 36.6 in year ago numbers up to 33.9. So less percentage of households relative to the total pie. And you can also see that Gen X is actually has more buyers, more heavy buyers. And so they've gone from a they've gone, sorry, this number didn't come out right, but it went from millennials went from let me fix this slide. I don't know what happened when I was doing it. But anyways, the more heavy buyers is actually the 117. So Gen X went from a 109 index to a 117. So even though they went down in percentage of households that bought in the total category, they are buying, there's more heavy buyers. So Gen X is really important, boomers are important, and it's really important to understand what's growing in that millennial segment as well. So we've got our millennials with increased households, we've got Gen X with bigger and more heavy buyers, and then boomers are big. So we need to drill in to understand them all from different perspectives. And so making sure that you create buyer profiles and for your brands and for your key segments and track them. And once again, the more you dig into this, it takes some time because if you can look at it by segments, like we looked at spaghetti and macaroni, the pasta types and those kind of things, you're going to get juiciness that is going to help you to so much better understand that shopper again. So explore additional demographic measures and breakouts for a deeper understanding, drill into those geographies and products, including competitive, so you can really get some fantastic information about who that shopper is. And if you're doing this for the rest of your organization, make sure you share that information, that it's not something that you just hold for yourself and put into your own presentations. This stuff we need to break out of these silos and share across the organization to make sure that everybody is on the same page and we're all looking at the same data. It's one of the biggest issues that currently happens as we're trying to kind of move to an omni-channel approach. Another important look in your panel data is to understand shoppers purchasing in brick and mortar or FMCG and e-commerce. So what's the breakout there and how did that retail purchasing change? So we can see that, is pasta, being taken over by e-commerce? No, but if you look at these growth numbers, e-commerce, 15% of the highest, the heavy buyers bought in e-commerce at least once over the time period, and 10.5% on medium. And if you look at the point change, you can actually see that every single type of pasta buyer moved some of their purchasing to e-commerce. So you may want to review leakage trees to see what brands are being purchased on and offline. Compare the demographics of FMCG versus e-commerce shoppers. So there's not a one set way to do this. You need to kind of drill in based on where the key nuggets are when you're going through all of this information and then diving in to see if there's any more depth that gives you some really big aha moments that can drive some new insights for you. And then start tracking those as we move into, down the road of 2021 and as we continue to navigate through this pandemic. So track monthly time periods and product groups for deeper insights, review leakage trees. Leakage trees on their own are just full of incredible information and insight. So incorporating that into understanding brands and what's being purchased on and offline can be a highly valuable piece as well. And then doing that comparing of the demographics. So now I've got some understanding of shopper behavior. I know much better about who my shopper is, who my heavy and light buyers are, the demographics for them. And so additional shopper insights, Suzy.com, if you've not heard of them, they're another data provider who we have partnered with to put together some pasta data. They run set surveys directly to different types of shoppers, and they can segment down very detailed. So they have asked some questions for me based on some of the questions that I still had. So one of the questions was where they have purchased pasta in the past year. So you can see the results here. I've highlighted some of the key ones for you to see who purchased most online. You can see millennials and Gen X. We've got Gen Z purchased most in big box and club and supermarket. So you can see that, like as an example with boomers, if 75%, by far the highest number for them, purchased in the supermarket. Very low online. So if you're trying to target your pasta buyers for boomers, you don't want to be going to, you want to be going to the supermarket because they're basically under on all of the other different store formats. Gen X, on the other hand, that 24% bought pasta online. And so comparing that, and the nice thing is that then you can drill in and ask specific questions to one of these groups or to each of these groups based on who they are and what's most important to them. So another question that we asked was, did you purchase online pre-COVID? Did you purchase pasta, or were you new to online? And you can see the new to online, millennials and Gen X. Boomers was almost nothing. So it was 3% pre-COVID, 3% after. So there wasn't even a change in that. So some really cool numbers there. And then you can also drill in to understand what's most important to them. Noodle type is very important to boomers in the supermarkets. And so noodle type might be something that becomes a real focus point if you're trying to reach out to or market specifically to those boomers, which we know 38% of those households represent the pasta households. So just some really great ways to show what's most important and least important. And then asking things like, are you is healthy pasta options important? And it's interesting because in that question, we can see millennials, it's most important, and very important or most important for millennials. And so 58%, that's very important to them. So I showed you that they grew in the number of millennials households that were purchasing pasta. And now you can see here that they're looking for healthy pasta options and they purchase online. So it starts kind of helping you go down that path of how you market to them, how you might be deciding on assortments for these different groups, and kind of how you need to be thinking about things based on the biggest targets and the biggest focus areas for you. And it might be different by generation based on some of these responses. So pretty cool, juicy nuggets of information once again. So know your shopper and make sure you take advantage of when you get to that point of, okay, I understand the shopper behavior, I understand some of the shifts and things, but I don't know the why. There's so many more easy ways to ask the why through some online surveying and reaching out to shoppers in some very different ways. There's a lot of different options beyond Suzy, and Shopper Intelligence is the other one that you can get survey information. There's a lot of other options out there. But now I just want to talk about remembering the shopper in your work. You need to include that shopper in the work that you do, whether it's business reviews or category reviews, innovation you're launching, brand health assessments, both for retailers and for manufacturers, determining shelf layouts and assortments. Or if you have a problem and you can't figure it out and you're looking at your point of sale data, your point of sale data is not going to explain to you why how the shopper is shifting. If you see you lost some market share or something like that, looking in on that and looking at your tactics in a very traditional way, it's not going to help. You need to drill into this shopper insights to get that understanding of what the heck is going on. That's going to give you a much clearer picture of your shopper. And once again, you need to share that broadly across your organization and ensure that you are being aligned and consistent in your approach, and that you don't have category management, shopper insights, shopper marketing, and customer marketing all working in silos and doing different things. And it's kind of interesting because some organizations, that's one person, all four of those roles I just mentioned. And in other ones, they have teams against every single one of those because they're larger and they have more resources and more data at their fingertips. But regardless of your scenario, you need to be thinking about shopper. So suggestions for shopper understanding, opportunities: complete a shopper understanding refresh based on the examples that I showed you here, drilling in, digging in, and don't be cheap and chintzy and stay at your top line level. Dig in, find stuff, spend the extra time to uncover and invest in your resources. And then when you get to that why, looking at and considering additional investment in shopper insights and research, or tapping into some of the resources you have available internally to be able to execute some of those questions. Share your shopper data and your insights broadly across the organization. Your sales team has to understand this stuff. They need to understand panel data. There's this whole value-based selling piece that is required these days, and that includes the shopper perspective. And then the other really important thing is making sure that you continue to track your shopper behavior. So do the deep dive, figure out what's most important. You can even create a shopper scorecard for the rest of this year that pulls out the key numbers, so you don't have to go do that same deep dive every month, but you know those key measures and what geographies and product levels you want to be doing them at, so that you can go in and quickly kind of check them to see where are we at this month, kind of a scenario. But do not sit or go back to your old ways of doing things. We have to move forward with this. So by doing focus on understanding your shopper behavior, better knowing who your shopper is in today's world, and remembering the shopper in your work, you're going to have more targeted shopper plans that align to the new shopper and shopper needs. And the new shopper isn't here yet. They haven't decided on where they're going to go back to old habits, where they're going to go back to new habits. In most cases, I think it's going to kind of be in the middle for a lot of this, as we see people, going out more to restaurants and some of those restrictions being lifted. You are going to see an impact on grocery categories, and that's just a fact, because they're not going to, unless everyone is just eating way more, which hopefully that's not going to happen, then that's got to come from somewhere else. But these more targeted shopper plans are going to result in improved business results and improved understanding of where we think things are going to go in the future. So that is it for the formal learning part. I have some questions for you though. So what I would love for you to do, if you're so inclined, is get your phone out or get your web browser out and go to this website up at the top, polev.com/CMKG. And there's a couple of questions here that I would love for you to participate in. We're just going to quickly go through these. What are your current go-to learning and training resources in 2020? So I'm just going to give you a minute to type in your answers. And then what you can do is you can actually also click on the ones you like if you want to upsell them And so if you want, oh, look at that, the first two are CMKG. I love that. You know, you may have resources like internal resources. You might have human resources and a learning and training team. You might have instructors internally that you go to. CPG Data Insights, that's also an awesome one. Awesome. Run by Sally Martin and Robin. They run a really great show that focuses mostly on Nielsen and IRI data, but has great information. Delta Associates also has some great training. I hope that you have some internal learning and resources as well, because those ones are really important ones for us to also use. There's also things like being able to have reading. Reading is a really critical one for you to use, and we are always posting. If you don't already follow me or CMKG in LinkedIn, we're always sharing news articles and valuable white papers and so on. So make sure that you're really taking advantage of all the different ones. If you're a CMA member, they also run some really great webinars. So it's not a one size fits all kind of answer to that. What are your favorite methods of learning? So this is question number 2. If you go back to your questions here, on demand, instructor led through classroom, through virtual, micro learning. There's all different kinds of learning. And so make sure that if you want to go and answer that question, but your favorite methods of learning, there's all different kinds of ones that you can be taking advantage of. Ranking, I'm just going to get, this is a little bit longer of a question because you have to rank it, but really making sure that you understand that there's different types of methods. A lot of companies, like I mentioned before, used to do instructor-led, and now they've realized that instructor-led is not necessarily going to be something that might even happen in 2021. There's a lot of a move to virtual. So micro learning is another one. Reading news and white papers and blogs, watching YouTube videos. I know that's my husband's favorite, and TED Talks, attending webinars. There's so many different options available for you. And it really is trying to figure out a blended learning approach, and that you should be learning every week. This is a pretty relevant and incredibly important time for you to be focused on you and making sure that you have a personal development plan in place. So the last question is, how do you feel about your personal training and development plan in 2021? Do you have one? Are you, making sure that you are focused on you? Because honestly, if you are not over on the right-hand side with the happy green face, and if you're over on the left-hand side more, or you don't really have a plan or anything like that, make one, because the last thing you want to do is realize that you're obsolete, or you're not focused, you don't understand, or you're thinking just inside your box of what your responsibility is. We have to become more crafted, and through cross training, understanding things. So I hear people say, well, I'm in sales, and I don't really care about e-commerce because we don't really sell much in the e-commerce space. Yeah, but your retailers care, because your retailers sell in the e-commerce space, and it's their biggest area of focus and investment, and you need to be able to engage in discussions with them. So making sure that you have a learning plan. So we have free assessments. So if you're not sure where to start, we can provide you with free assessments. We have offers of everywhere from a course to a virtual team training session on many different topics. We do coaching. We can even customize training. We can go so far as, if you're a small to mid-sized company, you don't have a learning portal, we can lease it. We can help you to create some really cool micro learning tools based on, small needs that you have. And it's not breaking your bank kind of stuff either. So make sure that you have a learning plan. And if you need some help on that hopefully you'll consider CMKG. We do have a special offer today for anyone who is interested in purchasing programs. We have a 50% off programs, only available till June 1st. You can also book a consultative session with Ty Snaith if you're interested in team or instructor-led training and all of the details there. Or if you have questions, if you're an individual that really needs some help on that, we've got Ty's email address there. I'll also be sending a follow-up email after this for those of you who participated, and so that you can get all of these links and such, because we also are going to be offering you links to a free assessment. You can choose from the category management, shopper insights, or sales assessment. So that dependent on where your priorities lie, you can do a different assessment. I'll give you personal feedback on what you should do to get started. We'll also be providing you a link to a COVID shopper resource tool and a Zoom recording of the course. So, and the course program and overview that I showed you in the Excel spreadsheet, that's all going to be available in the email follow-up that I send you. And then also, we've also put together a shopper refresh micro learning tool, which is a pretty beautiful tool. And if you go into LinkedIn and share what you enjoyed most about this course that I just took you through, and use the hashtag new ideas for work and comment to @SueNicholls, then I'm going to give you a link to this free tool to access. We really, really appreciate the learning in LinkedIn and the sharing. And so it's a really great way for us to market is through our fans and strong network in LinkedIn. So if you do this, I'll share the tool with you within 24 hours of posting. You'll hear back from me and we'll get that set up for you. So thank you in advance for doing that as well. So in terms of next steps, make sure you create a, in quotation marks, me plan. If you don't have access to a lot of training and resources, or, you know, you really do need help in training in some of the different topic areas that we can provide, I hope you'll be proactive, and I hope that you'll think about using CMKG as a training option. Keep learning and updated and fresh. Challenge yourself continually in 2021. If you don't understand things, go dig deeper. You shouldn't be kind of feeling scared of some specific areas. Go in and understand them. There's some actually just phenomenally cool stuff. But make sure that you're keeping yourself refreshed and always be learning. Carve out that 1 hour a week or whatever for your personal development, and don't decide, you know, I'm too busy doing all this work and so I don't have time for myself. It's kind of like why we need to work out and do whatever we need to do as side activities and stuff to make sure that we're continually taking care of ourselves. Save dollars, take advantage of the 50% offer, post feedback in LinkedIn and get free access to the Shopper Micro Learning Tool. And I will be sending you the course and recording with all of those other resources very shortly, as soon as that's available. So by Monday morning, you'll get access to all of the things that I've talked about, and maybe tomorrow if we're really organized. So I'm going to leave it open now for questions and answers. The formal part of the training is over. So if you have questions, please type them into the chat box and I'm more than happy to answer them. Thank you very much for your time. I hope you're inspired to get out there and do a shopper refresh for your team or your organization or for your specific desk. And like I said, make sure you don't kind of keep these things in silos and start sharing this stuff and figure out how we can broadly be managing and using our shopper insights data to kind of carve a path forward, because it's all about the shopper. It doesn't matter what role you're in, you need to focus on the shopper. So it's been a pleasure working with you today. If you have any feedback or questions, you can also contact me. I've got our website and my email address here. And I hope you have found today valuable. And as always, happy learning, my mantra. And I will stay on the line for if there's any questions, but thanks for participating today, and we'll chat soon. Take care. Happy learning.